The luminary dropped out of faster-than-light travel with a jolt that shuddered through the ship's massive hull. The eerie silence that followed was thicker than it should have been, almost suffocating. Captain Riven, his lean form anchored to the command chair, felt his entire body tremble slightly as the vibrations of the transition rippled through his core. The blackness of space outside the bridge's view screen bloomed into sight, revealing the uncharted system ahead, a seemingly ordinary expanse that hummed with potential danger. Riven blinked, his sharp eyes narrowing in suspicion. His smooth, dark skin tingled as his body adjusted to the unfamiliar calm. His crew, each of them males with their own hardened temperaments, were already moving in their familiar, efficient ways. None of them spoke, but their motions were as fluid as the ship's systems, poised for whatever would come next. "Commander Joran," Riven's voice broke through the quiet, sharp, like the crack of a whip. "Status on the scan. What are we looking at?" Joran, the fleet's tactics officer, sat at a laser plasma display that flickered with faint blue pulses. The alien display whined in low frequencies. Joran's skin was streaked with chitinous scales, his long arms clacking softly as he worked. "We're detecting a strange anomaly, sir. That third planet, Earth, has an extensive network of orbital structures, heavily focused on defense. But no faster-than-light travel signatures," he reported, his voice dry, devoid of awe or hesitation. Riven's eyebrow twitched slightly. Earth. He'd heard the rumors, the stories of a race of beings who hadn't yet pierced the stars, yet who seemed to have mastered the art of warfare in the silence between the galaxies. No interstellar trade routes, no signs of deep space exploration. A contradiction. The ship's quiet was unsettling. He could sense the anticipation among his crew, a sudden tension that stretched the space between them. No one spoke, but the thick energy in the air said everything. "Earth," Riven muttered, more to himself than to his crew. "Prepare a full scan, Commander. I want every system mapped. This may not be as simple as it seems." Commander Oren, the weapons officer, didn't shift from his station. His hand moved like a whisper over his console, and a holographic projection of Earth's surface appeared. His finger traced the contours of the map. "They're on high alert, Captain. Communication networks are active, but there's nothing like the open curiosity most pre-FTL civilizations show when first encountering an alien presence. It's cautious, almost like they're waiting for something." Oren's voice was clipped, his instincts kicking in. Riven's gaze tightened. He leaned forward, his fingers tapping lightly against the armrests of his chair. "What's their military presence like?" Oren's response was slow, precise. "It's not just military, sir. Earth's defenses are sophisticated. We're detecting energy shields, railgun arrays, and deep space platforms." Riven's eyes narrowed. "A pre-FTL species with this kind of defensive infrastructure?" Joran's voice cut through the air, slightly more urgent now. "And they're scrambling their satellite defenses. I've never seen a civilization so self-contained. This isn't just precaution. They're preparing for an assault." A chill ran through the captain's veins. There was a kind of unity in the atmosphere of the room, a sharpness among his crew that only came in moments like this, moments where every decision, every move, could change everything. He stood up, his boots clicking softly against the polished floor. "Lyra," Riven called out, his tone firm but calm. The communications officer, a lanky figure with pale skin, snapped into focus. "Send a first contact message, clear and direct. I want them to know we are here, and we are not hostile. Keep it simple." Lyra's hands flew across the heads-up display in front of him, his fingers working faster than most could process. "Message sent, Captain," he replied, his voice steady but tinged with an undercurrent of uncertainty. The tension on the bridge thickened as they waited, the seconds stretching into what felt like eternities. Moments later, the voice that responded was abrupt, authoritative. "This is Commander Varen of Earth's Orbital Defense. You have entered restricted space. Identify yourselves or leave immediately. Riven's jaw clenched. He had expected a response, yes, but the coldness, the bluntness of their answer unsettled him. A pre-FTL species with this much hostility? This is Captain Riven of the Galactic Consortium aboard the Luminary. We come in peace, seeking to establish first contact with your species. We are explorers, he replied smoothly, his voice carrying an air of diplomacy, even as his mind began to churn with the implications of their guarded tone. A pause. Then, the response came. You are advised to remain where you are while we assess the situation. Do not approach. Riven's gaze flickered to his crew. They're not welcoming us, but they're not attacking either. That's unusual, he muttered, more to himself. We should be cautious, Joran added, his eyes scanning the data streams. This isn't the typical reaction we encounter. They've been preparing for us, prepared for something. Riven's thoughts spiraled. What kind of species were they dealing with? They had the technology to keep watch over their own space. They had orbital defenses in place, active, sophisticated, and yet no FTL travel. What was the purpose behind their vigilance? What was the truth behind Earth? He turned to his crew, his expression darkening with the weight of the situation. Prepare the ship. If they want to remain cautious, so be it. But we're not backing down. As the ship drifted further into Earth's orbit, Riven couldn't shake the gnawing feeling that this was only the beginning. Something more was lurking. He could feel it. Earth wasn't just another pre-FTL planet. There was a quiet, suppressed fury here. And whether they knew it or not, the consortium had just stumbled upon a force they weren't prepared for. Riven stared out of the bridge's viewport, his eyes locked onto the blue and green planet below. This was more than a simple first contact. This would shape the future of the galaxy, and he could already feel the storm on the horizon. The luminary hung silently in the void, its immense shape casting no shadow in the endless dark of space. Captain Riven stared at the blue and green orb of Earth on the view screen, the distant world now swirling with complexity in his mind. His thoughts drifted like a gust of wind, sweeping through calculations, strategies, and what could be a dangerous misstep. There was something about Earth, something different. They were not the weak, innocent species he had been led to expect. Commander Joran, have their defenses shifted at all? Riven's voice pierced the quiet bridge, firm and authoritative, dispelling the calm that had gathered in the air. Joran's long fingers twitched over his controls, his dark eyes fixed on the series of rapidly shifting holograms. Still maintaining their posture, Captain. Communications are fully locked, and their military arrays are in full readiness. They've deployed a secondary defense grid around the lunar orbit. No sign of relaxation yet. Riven's gaze sharpened as he watched the display. Earth wasn't responding with curiosity or fear. No. This was the quiet, calculated tension of a species that had lived with conflict. They were not unprepared, nor were they surprised. The message they had sent, brief and clipped, hinted at a readiness to act rather than talk, a stark contrast to the usual eager anticipation he had seen when the consortium made contact with less advanced worlds. He turned towards Lyra, his communications officer, the young man's face taut with focus. "Send the message again," Riven ordered, his tone even but firm. "Make it clear we've come for peaceful intentions, but we're not leaving. We'll remain in orbit until we establish dialogue." Lyra's hands moved quickly over the heads-up display, his eyes flicking between data points. The transmission hummed as it went through the array of satellites. "Message sent, Captain. They should be receiving it now." Moments later, the response crackled through the communication system. "This is Commander Varen of Earth's Orbital Defense." The voice was cold, devoid of any warmth or trust. "You have entered restricted space, Captain Riven. Identify your intentions immediately, or we will have no choice but to take action. Do not approach any closer." Riven's jaw tightened, a slight frown tugging at his lips. There was no hesitation in their words, no sign of fear, only a calculated threat. They were testing him, testing his resolve, and so far they had shown no sign of backing down. "We are here to open a dialogue," Riven replied, his voice steady but laced with the cold edge of authority. "We wish only to establish peaceful contact and discuss the possibility of joining the greater galactic community. We mean you no harm. You have our word." A moment of silence followed, thick and uncomfortable. Riven's gaze never wavered from the screen. In the quiet, he could almost hear the creaking of the ship's systems, the soft buzz of laser plasma displays as his officers monitored every data stream, every frequency that passed through the air. When the voice returned, it was sharper, laced with a hidden fury. "Your presence here was not requested, Captain, and your assurances are meaningless to us. Earth will not fall under anyone's rule, especially not yours. Leave now, or we will treat your intrusion as an act of war." The finality in Varen's voice rang through the bridge like the clang of a steel door slamming shut. Riven felt the weight of the words press on his chest, but he kept his expression unreadable. His instincts screamed that Earth wasn't just testing them, they were laying a foundation for a confrontation, a resistance that had been forged in the fires of countless struggles. They were a species that had fought for every inch of their existence. Riven glanced at Joran, whose face remained impassive, but whose eyes flickered with a spark of uncertainty. "What are they hiding?" Joran muttered under his breath, barely audible. Before Riven could respond, the laser plasma displays flickered, and a new transmission appeared. This time, it was not from Earth's military. The voice that came through was calm, measured, and with a note of authority that sent a chill down Riven's spine. "This is President Valos of Earth." The voice was strong, his words deliberate. "I have authorized this communication. You are warned, Captain Riven, that your actions are considered hostile. Earth will not tolerate any further intrusion. Any movement beyond your current position will be met with force." Riven's hand clenched around the armrest of his chair. He hadn't expected Earth to act with such decisiveness. His heart pounded in his chest. This was no accident, no misunderstanding. Earth had been preparing for this moment long before they ever detected the luminary. "President Valos," Riven began, his voice composed, "I assure you, we do not wish for conflict. We only seek cooperation, a partnership. Your world, with its resources and potential, would thrive as part of the Galactic Consortium." The silence that followed was suffocating. It was as if the entire ship had paused its breathing, the very air compressed into tension. Then, Valos's voice came again, low and deliberate, carrying the weight of centuries of defiance. "We are not your subjects to be cajoled, Captain. We've fought too long to keep our sovereignty. You will not take it from us. If you do not leave immediately, we will take action." The transmission ended abruptly. Riven's eyes lingered on the screen for a moment, his mind racing. His first instinct was to retreat, to respect their warning and pull back. But something deep in his gut, told him this was not a species that would back down, no matter the odds. He could feel the edge of a blade now, sharp, unforgiving, and it was pulling them toward a conflict neither side seemed ready to avoid. There would be no more words, only actions. He turned to his crew, his face hardening into something cold and decisive. "Prepare for what comes next. We will stay in orbit and we will not yield. If Earth demands war, we will meet them on their terms." There was no hesitation in the air. The tension was no longer a quiet hum. It had erupted into a firestorm, and Captain Riven, like a wolf at the gates, could feel the storm coming. The first sparks of a war that could reshape the galaxy had been struck, and there was no turning back. Riven's eyes turned once more to the blue and green planet beneath them. Earth had made its stance clear. They were not just a world to be explored. They were a force to be reckoned with. And now, so was he. The cold silence that had filled the bridge was now crackling with the hum of impending conflict. The transmission from Earth had ended, but the words of President Velos echoed in Captain Riven's mind, sharp as a blade. "If you do not leave immediately, we will take action." That final threat, spoken with cold resolve, had set a course for something inevitable. There was no room for diplomacy now. The gloves were off. Riven stood motionless for a moment, his gaze fixed on the view screen, staring at the swirling blue and green planet below. His breath came in shallow bursts. He could almost feel the weight of the decision pressing on him, an unspoken reality that this mission was no longer about peaceful first contact. It was a confrontation, a battle of wills between two forces on a collision course. "Commander Joran," Riven said, his voice taut, eyes never leaving the screen, "I want a full analysis. Prepare to engage, but do not initiate until I say so. We need to know everything about their defenses. Give me a breakdown of every system Earth has activated. I need it all." Joran's fingers flicked across the controls, his sharp eyes scanning the data streams as he processed the staggering complexity of Earth's defense network. The laser plasma displays flickered rapidly as he worked, lines of blue code flashing with alarming speed. "They've got more than we anticipated, Captain," he reported, his voice strained with surprise. "Satellite arrays, advanced energy fields, and their surface-to-orbit missile platforms are armed and ready. Their military satellites are synchronized across multiple channels, coordinating in real time." Riven's face tightened. Earth's preparedness was no longer a surprise. It was a stark warning. They had anticipated something like this. "Commander Oren," Riven called, turning his attention to the weapons officer. "How are our weapon systems looking? Are we ready to match their firepower?" Oren's insectoid fingers hovered over his console, his insect-like antennae twitching as he ran through the weapon's diagnostics. "We're fully armed, Captain," he said, his voice calm but tinged with urgency. "But I'm not sure we have the element of surprise anymore. If they have these capabilities, we'll be fighting with our hands tied." Riven's mind raced. Earth wasn't just a pre-FTL species, they were something else. Something more. They weren't acting out of fear, but with the certainty of a civilization prepared for war. Their strategy wasn't just defensive, it was offensive, built on years, if not centuries, of preparing for an invasion that had never come, until now. "Captain," Joran added, his voice low but clear, "they've switched to a higher alert status. Their fleet, if they have one, is in hiding. They're expecting us to attack from the front. It's almost as if they know exactly what we're going to do." Riven's lips pressed into a thin line. The game had changed. The consortium wasn't going to waltz in with superior technology and expect to intimidate them into submission. Earth had already prepared for this scenario, and they had the tactical depth to back it up. It wasn't just about firepower, it was about control. "Lyra," Riven barked, his tone decisive, "establish a secure line with the High Council. I need an immediate update on the political response. Prepare them for a long haul. This won't be over quickly." Lyra's fingers flew across the console, pulling up the encrypted channels, his face set in concentration. "Understood, Captain. I'm patching through now." He adjusted his headset, and moments later a voice crackled through the comms. "Riven?" High Chancellor Varen's voice was clear, cold, and full of authority. "The Council has reviewed the situation. Your assessment was correct. We did not expect Earth to react this way. They are more dangerous than we anticipated." Riven's gaze narrowed. "They're not just defending themselves, they're preparing to fight. We need to adjust our strategy." Varen's voice grew sharper. "You will not retreat, Captain. We cannot allow Earth to dictate terms. They must either comply or be subdued. The Council has authorized you to escalate the situation. Their defenses must be neutralized at all costs." Riven's eyes flickered to his crew, each of them locked in their own thoughts. He could see the unease in their expressions. None of them had expected Earth to fight back with such intensity. But they had no choice now. The line had been drawn. There would be no turning back. "I understand, High Chancellor," Riven said, his voice steady despite the rising tension in his chest. "We'll engage, but we need to adapt our tactics. This won't be as straightforward as you think." The transmission ended, and the room seemed to pulse with the weight of what came next. The Council's orders were clear. Earth had to submit, or they would face the full force of the Consortium. Riven's instincts screamed at him, warning him that pushing forward with full force could trigger a galactic war. But the Council had made their decision. He had his orders. "Joran," Riven said after a long pause, his voice now carrying a razor-sharp edge, "prepare the tactical strike team. I want all systems on high alert. If Earth moves against us, we'll need to respond quickly." Joran's fingers flew across his controls once more. "Aye, Captain. All systems are primed. I'm preparing an evasive pattern in case we need to pull back." Riven turned to Orin. "I want our weapons set to full power. We're going to need every bit of it." Orin nodded. "Ready to launch at your command, Captain." Riven stepped forward, his boots tapping softly against the metal floor. "We're about to make history, gentlemen. Earth has called our bluff. Now it's time to see if we can outsmart them." As the crew moved into position, Riven stood at the front of the bridge, watching the blue and green planets slowly rotate on the view screen. A flicker of something, was it respect, rose within him. Earth was unlike any species he had encountered. There was no desperation in their defense, only quiet resolve. They knew what they were doing. "Get me Earth's military command," Riven said suddenly, his voice laced with determination. "I want to speak directly to President Valos. It's time we settle this once and for all." Lyra's fingers moved quickly, connecting the line. A moment later, President Valos's image appeared on the heads-up display. His expression was as cold as Riven had expected, his eyes burning with defiance. "I warned you, Captain," Valos said, his voice steady and full of resolve. "We will not bow to anyone. If you are truly here to negotiate, I suggest you reconsider your methods. If not, prepare for the consequences." Riven's grip tightened on the console. "We don't seek war, Valos, but we will not be turned away. If you want peace, prove it." The transmission ended, and Riven felt the weight of the moment settle deep into his bones. The path ahead was unclear, but one thing was certain. Earth would not yield. And now, the only thing left to do was find out who would bend first. "Prepare for engagement," Riven ordered, his voice cold and resolute. "We fight, and we fight to win." The tension in the room grew, the silent anticipation in the air thick with the knowledge of the impending conflict. The first steps into a war that could change the galaxy forever had already been taken, and Captain Riven would be ready for whatever Earth had to throw at them. The stillness that once enveloped the luminary's bridge had given way to the sharp chirps of instruments and the low hum of crew members coordinating in a flurry of motion. The tension that had settled in the ship was no longer an oppressive weight, but a sharp, electric current threading through the air, as real as the breath in their lungs. The moment of reckoning was here. Captain Riven stood at the helm, his hands gripping the edge of the command chair. The view screen before him displayed Earth in full, its swirling oceans and bright continents now a stark reminder of what they were about to unleash. His eyes, hard as stone, never left the planet. Earth's defenses had been activated, their full might now arrayed against them. This wasn't just a preemptive strike, it was a fight for survival, a test of strength between two very different worlds. "All systems are online, Captain," Joran said, his voice calm but edged with a tension that mirrored Riven's own. "We're ready for engagement. Earth has deployed a defensive perimeter, including energy shields, missile platforms, and orbital defense satellites. The moment we cross their threshold, they'll respond. Riven's gaze flickered to the heads-up display beside Joran, where Earth's defense network was laid bare in stark blue lines and numbers. They were no longer playing a game of diplomacy. This was war. "Prepare to engage, but hold our fire until I give the order," Riven ordered, his voice hard but controlled. "We're not here to waste ammunition. We need them to know we're serious." Orin, the weapons officer, nodded, his antennae twitching in concentration as he adjusted the settings on his console. "Shields and weapons at maximum capacity, ready to fire as soon as we breach their perimeter." The air in the bridge seemed to grow thick with every passing second. Riven's fingers flexed at his sides, every nerve in his body coiled in anticipation. The pressure was building, as though they were standing on the edge of a precipice, and one wrong move would send them spiraling. "Lyra, open a channel," Riven said, his voice steady despite the growing firestorm within him. The communication officer turned quickly, the glowing laser plasma display flashing as he tapped into the secured frequency. "Earth," Riven's voice rang through the comms, hard and direct. "We have come to engage. Do not test our resolve. Prepare for battle." The silence from the other side was deafening. Then, a crackling voice colder than ice came through the comms. "You've been warned, Captain. This is your last chance to turn back." Riven's lips curled into a tight smile, though there was no warmth in it. "I'll take that as a no," he replied. "We will proceed as planned." He turned to his crew, each of them locked in their stations, eyes narrowed and focused. There would be no retreat, no second chances. This was the point of no return. "Fire!" Riven barked, the words a command more than a suggestion. The luminary's massive cannons roared to life, sending a barrage of plasma shots racing toward Earth's outer defenses. The space around them erupted with flashes of light as the first volley of shots collided with the planetary shields. The impact reverberated through the luminary's hull, a deep thrum of energy that rattled every panel on the bridge. "Direct hit," Orin reported, his voice tinged with surprise. "Their shields are holding, but it's clear that they're not invulnerable." Riven nodded. "Good. They've got their defenses up, but we've got their attention now." The vessel trembled as Earth's countermeasures unleashed their retaliatory barrage. Brilliant streaks of light lanced toward the luminary, missiles and energy blasts lashing out in retaliation. The crew flinched, bracing against the powerful onslaught. The bridge lights flickered, the harsh pulses of energy just missing their hull, but coming too close for comfort. "Shields holding at 70%, Captain," Joran called out, his eyes darting across the console. "They've targeted our main propulsion systems. They're aiming for a weak point in our defenses." Riven's eyes narrowed. "Evasive maneuvers. Get us out of their crossfire. We don't want to be sitting ducks." The luminary lurched as the engines roared to life, the ship twisting violently as it danced through the incoming barrage of missiles and lasers. Riven's heart pounded in his chest, the sharpness of every movement echoing through his body. He had fought in dozens of battles, but this was different. This was no ordinary war. Earth was not retreating. They were fighting back with every ounce of fury in their veins. "Return fire," Riven ordered. "Don't give them a chance to regroup. Target their orbital missile platforms. Take them out before they can get another shot off." Orin's mandibles clicked as his fingers danced across the weapons console, aligning the plasma cannons with their targets. A streak of searing light shot from the luminary, slamming into one of Earth's missile platforms. The explosion rocked the space around them, and for a moment, Riven allowed himself a brief flicker of satisfaction. But it was short-lived. Another volley of missiles, faster, deadlier, came streaking toward the luminary. This time, their trajectory was locked. The ship's shields flared up, crackling as they absorbed the brunt of the attack. The ship shuddered violently, alarms blaring as the shields buckled under the pressure. "Damage report!" Riven snapped, his voice sharper than ever. "We've taken minor hull damage," Joran reported, his voice strained. "Nothing critical, but it's clear they're pushing back harder now." Riven's mind raced, calculations spinning in his head. They couldn't afford a prolonged engagement. They needed to end this quickly, decisively. Earth was holding its own, but they were fighting with everything they had, and Riven knew they wouldn't stop until they had pushed the consortium forces back. "Lyra," Riven said, his voice low and steady, "patch me through to President Valos again. Let's see if we can end this before it gets worse." The comms crackled, and the hard, unyielding face of President Valos appeared on the display. His expression was grim, his eyes filled with a steely resolve. "You've made a mistake, Captain. This isn't just about power, it's about freedom, and we'll defend our world at all costs." Riven's eyes burned as he locked eyes with Valos through the screen. "I didn't come here to conquer, Valos. I came here to negotiate. But if you want to make this a war, then it will be a war, and it will be your loss." The transmission cut off abruptly. A message. Final. Resolute. "Continue the assault," Riven commanded, his voice steady as the storm raged around them. The luminary surged forward, weaving through the debris of Earth's defense platforms. Another round of plasma fire streaked from their cannons, hammering Earth's outer defenses once more. This wasn't just a battle, it was a test of wills. Riven's eyes flickered with something like respect. Earth had shown it wasn't afraid to fight back, but it wasn't enough. The battle raged on with brutal intensity, the luminary and its fleet locked in an unforgiving dance against Earth's steadfast defenses. The deep hum of the ship's systems, once a subtle background presence, had now become a constant reminder of the chaos unfolding. The ship jolted under another barrage from Earth's missile platforms, the shockwave reverberating through the hull. Riven's jaw clenched as he braced himself against the violent shudder of the luminary. His gaze locked on the view screen as it flickered, displaying Earth's relentless defense. "Shields down to 40%, Captain," Joran reported from his station, his voice tense. "We've taken significant hits. Their energy weapons are more concentrated than we anticipated." Riven's eyes narrowed, watching the distant blue and green planet spin in the void like an unyielding sentinel. "Keep evasive maneuvers, Joran. If they think we're a stationary target, they'll finish us off quickly." His voice was sharp, biting through the thick tension in the air. Orin, the weapons officer, shifted in his seat, his insectoid body tense as he manipulated the ship's weapons systems. "We've done significant damage to their outer defense grid, Captain," he said, "but they're adapting quickly. Their countermeasures are faster than we expected. It's almost as if they anticipated our moves." Riven's mind raced. Could Earth have anticipated this? They were far more prepared than he had imagined. Every decision, every attack, seemed to be countered with calculated precision. This wasn't just defense. It was coordination, synchronization on a level he hadn't thought possible from a species still in its infancy by galactic standards. A low whistle cut through the tension on the bridge as Lyra, the communications officer, looked up from his console with a look of disbelief. "Captain," he began, his voice trembling with a mixture of awe and alarm, "I'm receiving an unregistered signal from deep within Earth's orbit. It's not one of their defense platforms. Something else is out there." Riven's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean? A new asset?" Lyra nodded, his eyes still fixed on the glowing display. "It's too advanced to be theirs. It's something alien, and it's moving fast." Riven's pulse quickened. Earth had managed to surprise them again. "Can you track it?" "I'm trying, Captain," Lyra responded, furiously tapping his controls. "It's small, agile, and cloaked, much more so than anything we've seen, but it's headed directly for our position." A sinking feeling washed over Riven. He had expected Earth to use every tool at its disposal, but this was something different, something hidden, a force that was not just prepared for them, but waiting for them. "All stations prepare for the worst," Riven ordered, his voice low and deliberate. "If Earth has allies, we'll need to respond in kind." Right as he concluded his words, a blast jolted the luminary, the whole ship quaking fiercely from the impact. It wasn't a missile or an energy pulse. It was something else, something closer, more devastating. The bridge lights flickered, and the overhead panels buzzed erratically as alarms blared. The view of Earth flickered, momentarily replaced by static, before the ship's stabilization systems kicked in and righted the image. "Status!" Riven barked. "We've taken a direct hit to our auxiliary power grid," Joran reported, his voice strained but steady. "It's from the Cloaked ship. It's firing energy-based weapons, high-intensity beams. We didn't even see it coming." Riven's mind raced. A hidden fleet. They had walked right into a trap. Earth had allies, aliens who had suffered under the Consortium's rule, and now they were turning the tables. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. This was no longer just a battle for Earth. It was a war of survival for the Consortium itself. Earth's defiance had ignited a spark, and now they were not alone. "Lyra," Riven ordered, his voice hard, "try to get a read on their fleet. I need to know what we're facing. Are there more ships? How many?" Lyra worked frantically, his hands moving with purpose. "I'm scanning, Captain. It's difficult to get an exact count. There's interference from their cloaking systems, but there's a large cluster of ships scattered across the system. They're not just hiding, they're coordinating, converging toward us." Riven's mind whirred with the implications. Earth had gone from defending itself to waging a campaign, and they had allies, alien ships that had risen against the Consortium. The entire system was becoming a powder keg, waiting to explode. "We're facing an organized resistance," Riven muttered to himself. "Not just Earth, but a coalition of forces. They're not just defending Earth, they're fighting for something greater." Oren's voice cut through the tension. "Captain, we're not going to survive this if we stay in orbit. We need to move now." Riven didn't need to be told twice. "Joran, evasive maneuvers, full throttle. Get us out of their firing range. We need to regroup and reassess." The luminary lurched, its engines roaring to life as it spiraled away from Earth's orbit, narrowly dodging another volley of laser beams from the Cloaked ships. The battle had shifted in an instant, and the Consortium was on the defensive. "Damaged sections are holding steady," Joran reported. "Shields are recharging, but we've lost a significant amount of power." Riven clenched his fists. They were vulnerable, caught in a war they weren't prepared for. The truth of the situation was becoming undeniable. Earth had sparked a rebellion, not just for its own survival, but for the freedom of every oppressed world in the galaxy. And now, those worlds were coming to its aid. Riven turned toward his crew, the weight of his responsibility pressing down on him. "We're going to need more than weapons to win this fight. We need strategy. Earth's allies are coordinating with precision. We need to outthink them, outmaneuver them. This is no longer about firepower. It's about who can control the battlefield." A pause settled over the bridge as the crew absorbed the gravity of his words. They weren't just facing a fight for Earth anymore. They were facing an uprising, an alliance that had the potential to shake the very foundations of the Consortium's power. "Lyra, prepare to send a message to the High Council," Riven said, his voice darkening with resolve. "We need reinforcements, and we need them now." Lyra looked up, his face tense, but nodded. "Understood, Captain." Riven's gaze turned back to the view screen, the Earth now distant but still a constant reminder of what they were up against. The conflict wasn't just a battle between two civilizations. It was the beginning of a galaxy-wide war. The rebellion was no longer a whisper in the dark. It was a fire spreading quickly, fueled by the very people who had once been subjugated by the Consortium. The luminary's engines strained against the weight of its own retreat, its massive form twisting through the void of space with all the grace of a wounded beast. The bridge was quieter now, the usual hum of command replaced by the soft hiss of malfunctioning systems and the low whine of damaged generators. Riven stood at the helm, his hands clasped behind his back, staring out at the now distant blue planet. Earth. The site of a battle he had not expected to fight, and the beginning of a war he couldn't have predicted. "Captain," Joran's voice was low, almost apologetic. "Their forces are still tracking us. They've locked onto our movements, and their cloaked ships are closing in." Riven didn't respond immediately. His eyes never wavered from the view screen, watching the stars drift by as if mocking him. They had been forced to retreat, not because they were beaten, but because Earth's alliances had caught them off guard. The rebellion wasn't just confined to Earth anymore. It was spreading across the galaxy. "Lyra," Riven said, his voice steady, though the weight of the situation pressed down on him like a vice. "What's the status with the High Council? Have they responded?" Lyra turned toward him, his expression weary but professional. "I've sent several updates, Captain, but there's been no reply. I believe they're in session. But given the nature of the situation, I'm not sure how long it will take to get a response." Riven clenched his jaw. The High Council had made its decision. They had sent him to Earth to subdue it. But now, Earth had proven more resilient than the Consortium could have imagined. They had allies, and those allies were ready to fight. They weren't just defending their planet. They were igniting a revolution across the galaxy. "How long until we can get back into fighting shape?" Riven asked, glancing over at Orin, his weapons officer. Orin's mandibles clicked nervously, his usual confidence shaken. "Our weapons systems are functioning, but we've lost several key targeting arrays. It'll take at least 12 hours to get them fully operational again. We won't be able to fight back with full strength until then." Riven absorbed the news without flinching. 12 hours. They couldn't afford that kind of time. Earth's forces were already mobilizing, and with every passing minute, their rebellion was gaining momentum. They needed reinforcements. They needed a strategy. And above all, they needed to strike before Earth's newfound allies grew bolder. He turned sharply toward Joran. "Get me a secure line to the Council. I want to speak to them directly. Now!" Joran didn't hesitate. His fingers flew across the console, pulling up the encrypted channel. The room held its breath as the transmission flickered, the figures of the High Council beginning to take shape on the laser plasma displays. Riven could feel the weight of their eyes on him before they even spoke. "Captain Riven," High Chancellor Varen's voice cracked through the comms, cold and businesslike. "Report." "We've sustained significant damage, High Chancellor," Riven began, his voice steady, but beneath the calm there was a simmering frustration. "Earth has not only defended itself, they've revealed a coalition of forces, several alien fleets that have rallied to their cause. Their resistance is organized, and it's growing stronger by the hour. We're no longer fighting just for Earth. We're fighting for control of the galaxy." A murmur ran through the council members, their voices rising in hushed disbelief. Varen's sharp gaze flickered across the screen as she took in the gravity of Riven's words. "A coalition of forces?" she repeated, her tone darkening. "We had no intelligence suggesting that Earth was in communication with other worlds." "They're not just communicating, High Chancellor," Riven said, his tone hardening. "They've mobilized fleets. I've seen their ships in action. We were caught by surprise. Earth has allies, and they're joining their cause, one by one." Varen's expression didn't change, but Riven could see the flicker of doubt in her eyes. "What is your plan, Captain?" she demanded. "How do you intend to overcome this new development?" Riven swallowed hard, his mind racing. The pieces were starting to fall into place, but the full picture was still unclear. Earth had sparked something bigger than itself, a galaxy-wide rebellion fueled by anger and resentment against the Consortium's reign. If they didn't act quickly, if they didn't crush this rebellion now, the galaxy could slip into chaos. We need reinforcements, High Chancellor, Riven said, his voice cutting through the tension. We need to launch a full-scale assault, force Earth and its allies to submit before they can organize further. If we wait, the situation will spiral out of control. Varine's gaze sharpened. Do not forget your mandate, Captain. The Council will not tolerate failure. You will strike at Earth's heart and subdue its defenses, but you will not destroy their will. The galaxy must be shown that the Consortium still controls the order. Bring Earth to heel. Now. Riven's blood ran cold at her words. The weight of the decision settled heavily on his shoulders. He understood the High Chancellor's position. The Consortium had been built on dominance, on control. But now, Earth's defiance had stirred something deeper, something that could reshape the future of the galaxy. It wasn't just Earth's fate on the line now. It was the Consortium's very grip on the stars. Understood, High Chancellor, Riven said, his voice low, his mind already shifting into tactical mode. We'll prepare for the strike. We'll hit their core. But we need time to rebuild. Give us that time. Varen's eyes glinted with cold resolve. You have until then, Captain. Do not fail. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving Riven alone with his thoughts. His crew waited in tense silence, the weight of the next steps hanging in the air. Joran, Riven said, breaking the stillness, set course for Earth's central command hub. We're going to hit them where it hurts. We'll target their military leadership. Cut the head off the snake and the body will fall. Joran nodded, his fingers already moving across the console to adjust their course. Aye, Captain. Adjusting our trajectory now. Prepare the fleet for battle, Riven ordered, his voice growing more resolute. We can't afford to hesitate. We strike fast, hit hard, and make them understand that the Consortium will not be so easily defied. The ship's engines hummed louder, the vibrations in the floor becoming more pronounced. The crew leapt into motion, their actions seamlessly coordinated as they prepared for the impending strike. Riven's mind was a whirlwind of strategies, counter-strategies, and decisions that would shape the galaxy. Earth had started a fire, and the Consortium was about to bring the full weight of its wrath to bear. But Riven knew something the High Chancellor didn't. This wasn't just about defeating Earth. It was about crushing a spirit that had ignited the hearts of every oppressed world in the galaxy. And that, more than any fleet or weapon, would be the true test. The Luminary's engines roared to life, the hum of the ship's systems growing louder as it surged forward, cutting through the darkness of space like a blade through cloth. Captain Riven stood at the helm, his face grim, his mind sharp and calculating. Earth was no longer just a target. It was a fortress, surrounded by allies, prepared for war. The High Chancellor had given the order, and the time had come to crush this rebellion before it spread beyond control. They would strike at Earth's heart, its command hub, and bring its leaders to their knees. No mercy, no hesitation. The view screen in front of him displayed Earth, its blue oceans and swirling clouds, a haunting reminder of what was at stake. The galaxy had not seen a conflict like this in centuries, an uprising that had spread faster than any intelligence report could have predicted. Riven's grip tightened on the armrests of his chair, the weight of the responsibility bearing down on him. Joran! Riven's voice cut through the tension, hard and commanding. Set the course. We're going straight for their military command center. If we break their leadership, we break their will to fight. Joran didn't hesitate. His hands moved quickly over the console, his insectoid form leaning forward as his eyes flicked back and forth, analyzing data streams. Course set, Captain. They'll be expecting us, but we should still be able to strike hard before they can fully react. Riven nodded. He had no illusions about the difficulty of their task. Earth had proven itself a formidable foe, but the Consortium's power was absolute. At least that's what they had thought. Now, with alien fleets rallying around Earth's cause, the situation had escalated beyond anything the High Council had expected. Prepare the fleet, Riven ordered. We strike together. Every ship must be in sync. I want no gaps in our formation. They will try to retaliate with everything they've got, but we can't let them take control of this fight. The bridge came alive as the crew moved into action, weapons systems powering up, shields charging, and the tactical display flickering to life. The war was no longer just about survival. It was about dominance. Earth's defiance had sparked a fire, and now it was time for the consortium to bring the storm. "Lyra," Riven called, turning toward his communications officer. "Get me President Valos. I want him to know we're coming for him." Lyra's fingers flew over the console, connecting the line with swift efficiency. A moment later, President Valos's face appeared on the laser plasma display, his expression as cold as ever, his jaw set with the quiet determination Riven had come to expect. "You've made your move, Captain," Valos said, his voice steady, not a hint of fear in his words. "But you're too late. The galaxy is already changing. You cannot stop what has already begun." Riven's eyes burned with intensity as he locked gaze with the president. "You're mistaken, Valos. The galaxy hasn't changed yet, but it will. When we crush your rebellion and restore order, you cannot stand against the might of the consortium." Valos's eyes flashed with a mixture of defiance and something else, something that Riven couldn't quite place. "This war is not about might, Captain. It's about freedom. Your empire has fallen into decay, and it's time for that decay to end." The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving Riven with the sound of his own breath in his ears. He didn't have time to dwell on Valos's words. The time for speeches had passed. It was time for action. "Fire!" Riven barked, his voice rising above the hum of the ship's engines. The luminaries' weapons came to life in an instant, the ship's massive cannons roaring as they unleashed a devastating barrage toward Earth's defenses. Energy blasts streaked through the vacuum of space, striking Earth's orbital shields with the force of 1,000 thunderclaps. The impact reverberated through the hull of the luminary, a deep, resonating thrum that made the entire ship shake. "Direct hit," Orn reported, his voice calm despite the chaos unfolding around them. "Their shields are holding, but they're weakening. We need to hit harder." "Keep the pressure on," Riven commanded. "Do not let up. We break through now, or we don't break through at all." The battle unfolded with a ferocity that Riven had not experienced before. Earth's defenses were far stronger than they had anticipated. Every energy blast, every missile fired, seemed to be countered by Earth's rapidly adapting tactics. The enemy wasn't simply reacting, they were anticipating, adapting in real time. It was like fighting a shadow, a foe that had seen every move before it was even made. The luminaries' shields flickered as another barrage of missiles came racing toward them, the sound of their impact like thunderclaps in the vacuum of space. The ship rocked again, and the alarms blared, signaling another breach. "Shields down to 25%, Captain," Joran called out, his voice laced with tension. "We can't take another hit like that." Riven gritted his teeth. He knew they were running out of time. Earth was pushing back harder than anyone had expected. The idea of crushing Earth's command structure was now looking less like a surefire victory and more like an impossible task. They needed a new plan, one that would give them the edge they so desperately needed. "Joran, get me a read on their fleet's movements. I need to know what we're up against," Riven said, his voice taut with urgency. Joran quickly analyzed the incoming data. "They're pulling back, Captain. Earth's forces are retreating from the front lines. It looks like they're forming up, preparing for a counterstrike." Riven's eyes widened as the realization hit him. This wasn't just a retreat. It was a trap. Earth wasn't backing down. They were regrouping to deliver a crippling blow to the consortium's forces. "Prepare evasive maneuvers," Riven snapped. "Get us out of their firing range." But it was too late. From the edge of the asteroid belt, a new fleet appeared, sleek, fast ships with markings that were not of Earth's origin. The alien vessels had arrived. "They've called in reinforcements," Joran said grimly. The rebellion is no longer just Earth's. It's a coalition of worlds. Riven's heart sank as he watched the enemy fleet close in, their weapons flashing as they opened fire on the consortium ships. The tide of the battle had shifted again, and this time the consortium was caught off guard. "Fall back! Regroup!" Riven commanded, but the damage had already been done. The newly arrived alien ships moved with deadly precision, hitting consortium vessels from every direction. The luminary shuddered as another missile exploded nearby, sending shockwaves through the ship. The bridge lights flickered, and the main systems began to sputter. Riven's hand clenched around the console, his mind racing. He had underestimated Earth. He had underestimated the rebellion. What had begun as a mission to crush a single world had now spiraled into a galaxy-wide conflict, one that the consortium could no longer control. The battle was no longer just about Earth. It was about the future of the entire galaxy. "Prepare to make the jump," Riven said quietly, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "We need to retreat and reevaluate. We're not done yet." The luminary's engines roared to life again, and the ship began its retreat, pulling back from the heart of the conflict. Riven's gaze lingered on the view screen, where Earth and its allies now stood tall in the distance, a symbol of defiance. He knew this was far from over. Earth had won this round. But the war was just beginning. The final stand was not yet decided. And Riven would not rest until the consortium had its victory. The luminary's engines hummed with quiet authority as it retreated, its hull battered and scarred, but still holding firm. Captain Riven stood at the helm, his face unreadable, eyes fixed on the view screen as Earth and its new allies grew smaller in the distance. The battle had been fierce. Earth had delivered a blow to the consortium that no one had seen coming, an uprising that had shifted the balance of power across the galaxy. For the first time in centuries, the consortium was no longer the uncontested ruler of the stars. "Status report," Riven said, his voice hollow, though his mind was racing. He had lost track of how many ships they had lost in the retreat. The fleet had been scattered, but they were still alive, and they would regroup. The consortium had to fight on. Joran's voice was strained but composed. "We've taken heavy losses, Captain. Our shields are at 30%, weapon systems are barely functioning, and the tactical strike team is reporting significant casualties. The alien fleets caught us off guard. We're not in any shape to continue fighting." Riven closed his eyes for a moment, his fingers tight around the console. "We'll regroup, Joran. We'll fight again. The war isn't over. We can't let Earth and its allies think they've won." He turned his gaze back to the stars outside. The conflict had escalated beyond anything the High Council could have foreseen. The consortium's arrogance had led them into this war. Earth had shown them the cost of underestimating a species with nothing left to lose. And now, Earth had allies, alien worlds that had long lived under the consortium's thumb. They were rising together, creating something the galaxy had never seen before. "Lyra," Riven said, his voice quieter now, as if the weight of everything had finally caught up with him. "Patch me through to the High Council. They need to hear this directly from me." The comms flickered, and moments later the holographic images of the High Council filled the screen. Their faces were a blur of harsh angles and sharp expressions, their postures stiff with authority. High Chancellor Varen's face appeared front and center, her crystalline features glowing faintly in the darkened space around them. "Captain Riven," Varen said, her tone cool and composed, though there was a subtle edge to her words. "Report." Riven stood taller, his voice steady despite the chaos behind him. "We've lost the battle, High Chancellor. Earth is no longer just a single world under siege. It's become a symbol, a beacon for every oppressed species in the galaxy. Their resistance has sparked a revolution." Varen's eyes narrowed. "You failed. You were supposed to crush them, not inspire them. What is your plan now?" Riven's gaze was unwavering. The rebellion has already spread. We can't win this by force alone. If we continue this war, we'll lose everything we've built. Earth and its allies will never bend to our will. But there's still a chance to forge a new path. The room fell silent for a moment, the tension hanging thick in the air. Varen's voice finally broke the quiet, low and dangerous. "What are you suggesting, Captain?" "I'm suggesting," Riven said, his voice firm, "that we stop trying to crush Earth. We offer them a place in the galaxy as equals, not subjugates. We form an alliance, not a dictatorship. If we want peace, we have to start by respecting their sovereignty." A murmur of disbelief rippled through the council members, but Varen's gaze never wavered. She leaned forward, her eyes piercing as she studied Riven. "Are you suggesting we surrender? That we give Earth and its allies the power to challenge the consortium?" Riven's gaze hardened. "Number, I'm suggesting we evolve. If we keep pushing them, they will tear the galaxy apart. The war will never end. But if we offer them something new, something they can believe in, we might just have a chance to unite the galaxy, rather than divide it further." For a long moment, no one spoke. The weight of Riven's words hung in the air, the future of the galaxy hanging by the thinnest of threads. Finally, Varen broke the silence, her voice sharp with authority. "You are out of line, Captain. You've failed in your mission, and now you suggest we negotiate with the enemy?" Riven stood taller, his resolve unshakable. "I didn't fail, High Chancellor. I learned. The consortium has ruled through fear, but it's only fueled the flames of rebellion. We have the power to change the course of history. But if we keep trying to rule with an iron fist, we'll lose everything. I am asking you to choose a new path." Varen's eyes gleamed, her expression unreadable. She opened her mouth to speak, but before she could respond, a new voice echoed across the comms, one that Riven did not expect. "This is President Valos," came the voice, steady and commanding. "And this is my offer to the consortium. We will not bow to you, but we are willing to consider peace. We propose a galactic alliance, not one based on subjugation, but on mutual respect. You may keep your power, but it will no longer be at the expense of others. We are prepared to negotiate terms." Riven's breath caught in his throat as the weight of the words hit him. Valos wasn't just offering peace. He was offering something more, a new structure for the galaxy, one where the consortium would no longer rule by fear but by collaboration, and that would mean the end of the old ways. The High Council fell silent, each member processing the proposal. Varen's face was hard to read, but Riven could see the faintest flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. She had always believed in the strength of the consortium's control, but now, for the first time, that control was being questioned. Varen's voice finally broke the silence. "This is treason. You would betray the consortium for a dream?" Riven's voice was low but filled with certainty. "No, High Chancellor. I'm not betraying the consortium. I'm saving it. The galaxy is changing and we have a choice. We can either continue to fight and risk tearing everything apart, or we can adapt and lead in a way that benefits everyone." Valos's voice came through again, calm and resolute. "We stand by our proposal. The galaxy will not be ruled by fear anymore. We want an equal partnership, and we are prepared to work with you to create a new future." The High Council seemed to hesitate. For the first time in centuries, Riven felt the power of the consortium waver. Varen's eyes flickered between Riven and Valos, her mind working through the implications of such a shift. Finally, she spoke, her voice quieter now, filled with a reluctant respect. "You're right, Captain. We have been wrong. The galaxy is changing, and if we don't change with it, we risk everything we've built. But this will not be easy. The Council will have to vote. The decision is not mine alone." As the transmission ended, Riven stood in silence, feeling the weight of the moment. The war was over, not because of force, but because Earth had shown the galaxy what it meant to stand together. For the first time, Riven felt something like hope. A new order was emerging, one that would not be ruled by fear, but by respect and cooperation. The galaxy was changing, and the Consortium's reign was over. As the stars outside the luminary's viewport slowly shifted, Riven allowed himself a single, quiet breath. The future was uncertain, but the path forward was clear, and it began with unity. The new order had begun.